Masai Ujiri, Nick Nurse, and almost every Toronto Raptors player gave their season-ending interviews over the past few days, so I'm going to break down my 5 major takeaways from all of those interviews and dive into what this means as we inch closer to the NBA draft and obviously the free agency period, which gets every NBA fan excited. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, breaking down the 5 major takeaways from the season-ending interviews from the Toronto Raptors. And, the last video we made was a post-game reaction from Game 6 of the Philadelphia 76ers Toronto Raptors series, and took a little bit of time to recover. We missed a couple bit of some news, but we apologize for that. But I do want to come out and say congratulations to Philadelphia, because I don't know if we gave a sincere, strong congratulations to that team. They deserve this series. They won it. They're a win-now squad. And even though the series was definitely a roller coaster, some bad blood was brewing between Raptors and Sixers fans, even Raptors and Sixers players, coaches, all that sort of stuff. It's a fun series. I like the little rivalry we got going. It's nice that we obviously got the one in 2019. They got the one now. So it'd be nice if we clash again with Philadelphia and get our revenge. But that's not what this video is about. We're talking about the 5 major takeaways. And the first one, it's something that needs to be said, it needs to be screamed to some Toronto Raptors fans, and it's that Siakam and Fred VanVleet will not be traded. Now, this is an opinion that Riker and I have held this entire, especially second half of the season. I've been on the Siakam and Fred wagon from the jump, even when Fred was looking down there for a bit. Siakam was looking down there for a bit, but Masai Ujiri and Nick Nurse are clearly on that boat, because usually if a guy's going to be moved or there's some disgruntlement or they're frustrated about the performance from 2 stars, they leave a lot to be said about those guys. But Masai Ujiri especially, the guy who makes the decisions about the player personnel moves, and Nick Nurse had a high praise from this as well, but I'm going to dive into the Masai Ujiri comments. He loves these 2 guys, and deservedly so. They had great seasons, with the exception of Fred VanVleet's obviously playoff performance, but he was injured, folks. Stop thinking that this is the Fred VanVleet. The healthy Fred VanVleet was dropping 50 bombs, and I don't know, no, the 50 bomb wasn't this season, but dropping massive games, dropping 30-point third quarters, and leading his team to the All-Star team. But Masai Ujiri, firstly, and I'll stay on the Fred VanVleet topic, essentially said when questioned whether or not Fred VanVleet fits in with obviously the 6'9" long boy lineup that performed well for us in the playoffs this year. I saw a lot of people making comments that maybe Fred doesn't fit with this roster, given the fact Scottie looks so good at the point guard. The long defensive unit was great, and Fred VanVleet was getting burnt, even though people like to leave out that he was playing on one leg. But with all that said, Masai Ujiri responded saying, well, you know what? Fred VanVleet's mentality, his winning presence, his leadership, all that sort of stuff. Bet on yourself. The fact that he's overcome every single odds that's been presented to him over the past few years, not just in college, but with the Raptors. He's been counted out so many times. He's got a finals MVP vote, right? He's got an NBA championship. He's got an all-star appearance this season, right? All of those things, they're bigger than 6'9", and that's why Fred VanVleet is the leader of the squad. That's why he's staying with this team. Folks, I'm seeing people say trade Fred VanVleet for Rudy Gobert. Get out of here with that madness, that blasphemy, that cheese, that foolishness. Not going to happen. Masai Ujiri seems to agree with it. And the way he was talking about Pascal Siakam, and I don't think there's definitely not nearly as much as Pascal Siakam trade this man, bashing and stuff in the comments we've been seeing recently, but there is still some of it, and Masai Ujiri he was almost in tears about the growth of Pascal Siakam, everything he had to overcome from the poor Tampa season where he couldn't touch a ball for 3 months and then struggled to get his game going back, the injuries he's dealt with, the bubble season, that's what I was talking about, the Tampa year, ups and downs, COVID injuries and stuff, and then this previous offseason dealing with that shoulder surgery, missing the first month of this year, and coming back to give the season that he did, likely an all-NBA performance. Shout out to Pascal, Masai Ujiri, Nick Nurse. The whole team wants to keep him, so I love seeing that. Those guys are not going to be traded. I want to put an end to any of those comments here at the start. So that's what I did early in this podcast. But the second takeaway, the second major takeaway we're diving into, it's the Toronto Raptors want a deeper bench next season. This is also something that was harped on consistently. I'm mostly going to be focused on Nick Nurse and Masai Ujiri because they're the decision makers on the team. But we'll dive into some of the topics from the interviews from the players. But the deep bench is something that was clearly brought up, and it's been a huge topic of discussion this entire season. Nick Nurse, especially when injuries were happening with the squad we saw in the playoffs, would only run 7 guys deep. Guys like Malachi Flynn, Yuta Watanabe, Champagny at times, our guy Champagny Poppy, right? He got taken out of the lineup after he fouled Kevin Durant a bunch. I get to play these animations. Might be the last time I get to play the Svi Mihailuk, right? The Svg Water. All of these guys were supposed to be players that going to be in the rotation, going to get minutes, going to have an impact on this team, and unfortunately played their way out of their rotation. Were essentially unplayable in big games, and the Raptors, they needed that upper seed, and clearly, it would have helped if we had home court, honestly, in this series against Philadelphia. But getting the right matchups, getting into the play-ins, playoffs, avoiding that play-in tournament, that was a huge factor for the Raptors this regular season, and the deep bench guys couldn't do it. And I think it was Nick Nurse who brought up saying that, with all the health and safety protocols that go on throughout the years, it seems like the injuries have been increased over in recent seasons and the rest and stuff. You're going to need a deeper team. They're no longer a league where you can run 9-10 guys and count on them to be your key guys. And then, your deep bench is just either pure development or just unplayable dudes. That's not the modern NBA now. Things have changed and the Raptors need to have a deeper squad. So and Masai Ujiri made it known that it's not just going to be, we have to look externally for that. We could also develop some guys, make sure that they can sort of grow into their own on this Raptors team. But they're going to make sure that they have a squad, and they're going to evaluate the talent, evaluate that everything's going to be right next season, that we're not going to be left out to dry with the deep bench players, or at least try not to be left out to dry by the deep bench players next season. So that's going to be something I'm encouraged about, and that's obviously something that needs to be addressed. But the next one I'm diving into is Chris Boucher will likely be back. And this is a good transition because Chris Boucher was the best player off the Toronto Raptors bench this season consistently over the course of this year. Had a brutal first month, but from that point, really was great for this team. He is an unrestricted free agent. I got all the unrestricted free agents in the NBA pointed out down below on the base bar too, if you want to check that out. But Chris Boucher, a monster this season. Shout out to his development, his growth. Had that ridiculous Game 6 against Philadelphia. Got right inside of Joel Embiid's head. Got shoulder checked by him, and I think he earned a contract with the Raptors squad. Now, the reason I'm saying that Chris Boucher will likely be back, because the way he was talked about in all the interviews, it's almost as if it's guaranteed that he's here. It's like a deal has already been agreed on and not made official, because Masai Ujiri's talking about, we need development from Precious. We need development from guys that are under contract. Scotty, all these guys. We also need it from Chris Boucher. Dropping his name in there just like he's guaranteed going to be on the roster next year. So the way they were talking about, the tones, if you feel it, if you watch the interview, that's the vibrance in that quote specifically that you get. It seems like Chris Boucher is going to be back. Now, we're going to debate what contract he might get back on, because it doesn't seem like a guy that had massive trade value across the NBA. Obviously was rumored in some deals over the trade deadline, but he is immensely valuable to the Toronto Raptors team. So he's coming off a $7 million contract. Could that get up to 10, 11, 12? Would that be too much for Chris Boucher? I don't know. For a guy that sort of is that X factor off the bench, I really want to bring him back. And if you give him the 10, $11 million sort of mark for a contract, it's very tradable if you do need to load off of salary in the future. So I think you give him that contract, bring him back, even if it's a little bit of an overpay, even if it's a bit of a risk. Chris Boucher deserves that money, and he deserves to be on this Raptors squad. So I'm encouraged that Masai Ujiri, Nick Nurse are talking about developing Boucher like he's going to be on this roster long term. So that's a huge positive there. Now, the next thing I'm diving into, I may as well keep it under the same theme. There's no mention of Gary Trent Jr. by Masai. Now, maybe I'm potentially reading too much into these comments, reading too much into these interviews by who he's mentioning in these hour-long interviews, but there wasn't a breath, there wasn't a mention, there wasn't a word of Gary Trent Jr. There was of Delano Banton, Justin Champagny, there was of Yuta Watanabe, there was of every single Raptors starter with exception of Gary Trent Jr. So I don't want to get, all conspiratorial and going crazy with it, but I was very surprised because Gary Trent Jr. really, when healthy, when he wasn't dealing with that illness, looked like one of our better players, one of our top 3 guys maybe in the playoffs this year. So he's also one of those young guys that can develop, that can fit into these niches. So I don't know why there wasn't a mention of him, just in terms of his improvement, how he excited the Raptors front office or anything like that. And there's a lot of people talking about maybe Gary Trent Jr. is the odd man out on this group because he is an unrestricted free agent if he decides to give up his player option after this year. Obviously, Fred VanVleet will also have a contract coming up. Pascal Siakam, there's only a couple years left on his deal. OG Anunoby just signed a large extension. Scotty Barnes, at his trajectory, will likely be on a max contract at some point. And all those guys are sort of those wing-ish positions, right? 1 through 3, 1 through 4 and stuff. Does Gary Trent Jr. sort of the odd man out in that? Does Masai Ujiri trust him in terms of being our starting shooting guard that deserves $20+ million per year? I don't know. I would, given his age and given what he's shown, but wasn't mentioned in there. So I don't want to read too much into it, even though I just talked about it for a minute and a half. But what do you guys think? Do you think it's a sort of a red flag that he wasn't mentioned in Masai Ujiri's post-game interview? Let me know. It was like an hour-long post-game session. And Gary's kind of been left out of those topics as well in previous interviews by Masai Ujiri, even last season. So I don't know. He's a tradable contract right now. I've seen rumors of him and Boucher in a sign-and trade for Gobert, but the Gobert rumors are just crazy. We might have to do a whole video on Gobert because there's been so much talk about it, but let me know what you guys think on that topic down below. And the final topic of discussion we're going to break down in this one is rim protection and shooting are priorities for the Toronto Raptors team. This isn't really big news. It was directly quoted by Masai, Nick Nurse, all these guys talking about how we need, especially defensively, our defensive rebounding was one of the worst in the NBA this year, and that can't be the case. We're a good offensive rebounding team, but we just saw how it was difficult guarding guys like Embiid, and surely if we face off against Giannis, Bam Adebayo, these guys, you need a few more, one at least massive dude to throw in there when things need to be shaken up on the defensive end and be a rim protector and stuff. That's going to be huge. And Masai Ujiri said he doesn't discriminate against 7-foot players, right? If you're above 6'9", there isn't a cutoff for making this team. That's not what he's about. He just wants guys that play our style of defense, especially. That's the context of what was brought up. And makes sense. He wants someone that's switchable, and there's not many 7-foot players that can guard, your shooting guards, your point guards, small forwards. Precious Achiuwa, even though he's 6'9", can do that and is a legitimate center. Maybe he improves it, puts a little bit more weight on, gets a few more of those defensive rebounds, but I could see us getting one of those center players that a lot of people expect. And then it was also brought up about, how are we going to weigh, or how the Raptors going to weigh bringing in a shooter that isn't necessarily that athletic, and those are the things he said he's going to evaluate this offseason. But the Raptors want defenders. It's made known that the Raptors want guys that can play defense. If a shooter's going to be out there on the market, they want to bring in more shooting, but they got to be able to play defense. So those are the major takeaways I saw from the post-game interviews. A couple of other tidbits, notes that I wanted to bring up. Scotty Barnes seems like he is ready to come back, put some work in, and take that leap as sort of a second-year star. Obviously, the third year is where you usually see that massive jump, but he wants to work on his three-point shooting, his dribbling, and all that. Pascal Siakam, we always talked about how he just develops so much season by season by season by season, and this is his first proper real offseason following the championship year, really. Yeah, this is the first year we get to see Pascal Siakam grow and develop, because obviously 2 off seasons ago is the bubble season where he didn't have access to a gym. Last year he had his shoulder surgery, so he wants to come back a more improved 3-point shooter, better ball handling, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm excited to see Pascal Siakam putting that work in the gym. But what else did you guys see from those post-season interviews? Let me know in the comment section below. You guys are the best for making this far. Check out the Instagram, the TikTok, the Twitter, all that cool stuff. Guys, appreciate you. Subscribe to the Raptors Digest for the latest NBA news. Subscribe to Courtside Digest. Marcel and I are going to be doing a lot more stuff over there as the Raptors aren't playing for at least the next month. So you guys are the best. Anyways, I'm signing off. Cheers.